Hey guys, welcome to the second video of building your OBS Powerstroke and the parts it takes to make a certain power goal. I'll start out by saying the biggest complaint that I got about the last video was how long it was. So what I'll say is this, we do have a podcast too. It's 1023 Soul Shop Talk, and it should be on pretty much every podcast platform. If you're looking for more of like a long form like explanation of certain things, then that's a good place to check too. Otherwise, I'm going to try to make more videos and try to cut them up a little bit shorter. So the last one was 25 minutes. We're going to try to keep this one under like 15. And what I would say ahead of time, and I know a lot of people, it can be maybe kind of frustrating when people tell you, oh, just go look at my last video if you want more info. But I'm going to say it this time too. A lot of the transmission and fuel system stuff was covered in there. And so we're going to make it just more specifically about like the injectors and the turbo that it takes to get to like the 450-ish, let's say 400 to 480 horsepower range, versus last time we were in like the, stock to, 350, 360, maybe up to 400. So today we're basically going to focus on the 450 range and the injectors and turbo it takes to get there and a little bit of why. So again, we're going to kind of go back just on our website, just 1023diesel.com, and I'm going to look at we're going to look at the packages. But like I said before, I don't want the packages to be like buy this package or this package is better than that package. All the packages it's generally the stuff it takes to get to a certain level put together. So yes, it's a package, but they can be configured, and I just want to explain the reason for them and why they are configured the way they are. So let's jump into the OBS Power Packages, and we're going to start by covering one thing that's kind of complicated, but I'm going to cover it pretty fast. And I think we have another podcast coming up about it that'll explain better, and maybe I'll make another video that explains better too. We're jumping up to a hybrid injector in this case. Essentially what that means is there's two different kinds of injectors that are going to be used most commonly on 7.3s. You have A-code injectors, and that's what the stock injectors are. And like the 160s and 180s, those are pretty much all going to be A-codes. There's 7-to-1 injection ratio. And then usually if we're going to get past or much past like 400 horsepower, we recommend going to a hybrid injector, which is a 5-to-1 injection ratio. And the most simplistic way of explaining that is a 7-to-1 injection ratio means two things. First, it means you've got two ways of getting fuel in the cylinder. You've got pressure, which is ICP, and you've got time, which is pulse. Okay. Pressure is your injection control pressure, which is created by your high pressure oil pump. The multiplication factor, the 7-to-1 or 5-to-1, means that if you have, let's say, 3,000 PSI of injection pressure of ICP, then on a 7-to-1 injection ratio, you're going to have 21,000, 7 times 3,000 of actual injection pressure in the cylinder. Like the fuel pressure exiting the nozzle is going to be 21,000. And on a hybrid, it's going to be 15,000. It's 5 times 3,000 PSI. So it's a multiplication of ICP by whatever the ratio is inside the injector. What that also means is that let's just give a random example. Let's just say, this isn't how it works, but let's say you want to inject 1 cc of fuel. On a 7-to-1 injection ratio or an A-code, so in stock injector or 160 or 180, it takes 7 times that amount of fuel. So to inject 1 cc of fuel, it would take 7 times that much oil to do the job, essentially. Again, this isn't exactly how it works, just a good way of trying to explain it. On a 5-to-1 on a hybrid, it takes 5 times that oil. So to inject 1 cc of fuel, it takes 5 cc's of oil. So it's a pretty significant improvement when we start trying to up the capacity, like the cc's, like the quantity that we could possibly inject. It makes a big difference in what your high pressure oil pump is going to be able to supply, or be able to support. So when we get up past 400 horsepower, generally recommend not running like a 180-100 or a 180-80 or 160-100. Typically people will call them like a stage 2 injector. Typically would like to bypass that and look at doing something like a small hybrid, which is where the 200cc or 205cc injectors come in. So basically our stage 2 and our stage 2.5 package are essentially the same thing. They're all going to have a 205/80 hybrid in them from Full Force. They're all going to have an irate diesel complete fuel system in it, so from the selector valve forward, so you retain both tanks. They're going to have a PHP hydro with tuning on them, with custom tuning, and that's all configurable. You can change that or whatever. We kind of covered that in the last one, and we're not going to get too deep into the options there this time. The difference between them is the turbo. So the stage 2 package is a drop-in turbo option. It's a KC turbo stage 2. The stage 2.5 package is a T4 mount with an S364.5. Now, typically the way I would look at it is this. If you already have an intercooler, you've already done belted up pipes, and you're just looking to do the injectors and a turbo and let's say you've even done a fuel system or whatever, I would recommend at that point saying, let's say you don't have an upgrade path in the future, you just want to do this setup and you want to be done with it. You don't want to change injectors or anything down the road. It's not a bad option to go with the drop-in. It's going to save quite a bit of money if you already have those parts. And that's where like the stage 2 package comes in. Now, the stage 2.5 package, in other words, if you're looking to be in this power range, and let's pull this up here, and you don't have an intercooler, you haven't done up pipes, you haven't done a down pipe, you haven't done really anything, and you're starting with a stock truck, this is where I'd recommend looking at doing a T4 kit. Or if those things are true, and you do have an upgrade path in the future, like you think down the road you might build a motor and or you might just do like head studs and valve springs, and you're going to want to upgrade to like a 250-100. Like if you're the kind of person that's going to continually keep upgrading, then maybe consider doing a T4 kit to start with. It's going to come with the down pipe, the up pipes, the mounting, the intercooler piping, basically everything from where an intercooler would sit to the bottom of your down pipe. All of that is replaced, and it is set up and ready to swap any of dozens of chargers into. So you do this setup now, and then down the road you decide to put bigger injectors in, just swap a different turbo on it. There's tons of T4 chargers out there, or chargers that could have a T4 flange on them, I should say. And the other thing is, like, if for whatever reason you decide to go down in injectors, let's say someday you want to go back down to like a stage 1 injector or something, you don't like the 205s or 205/80 or something in that range, you could drop the turbo size down. You could put like a S363 with a smaller turbine wheel or something. It's very versatile, and it gives you tons of options is the point. And the turbo options, like a Borg winner, like an S300 Supercore, it's pretty cheap. They're like $500 or $600 versus $1,200 or $1,300. And so the reason I say if you are looking for an upgrade path too, if you go with a drop-in turbo, you're pretty stuck. There really isn't a better options out there than KC's like stage 2. The only thing that would be better would be their stage 3, which is basically the same charger with a little bit bigger inducer on the compressor wheel. That's it. And so that really isn't what I recommend trying to support 500 plus horsepower. It would work okay, but there are better options. So the other thing I want to point out too, the reason we want to do a 205/80 versus like a 205/30, if you want to get above like a stage 1.5 injector, the reason for that is this. My logic is that a 15-degree high-pressure oil pump on an OBS generally is going to support a small hybrid like a 205 or 200cc hybrid, no problem. I really haven't seen one not keep up. And the reason I don't like a 205/30 is it comes down to, like I said earlier, you've got two ways of getting fuel in the cylinder. You've got pressure and you've got time. Time is your pulse, pressure is your ICP, your injection pressure. The reason for a bigger nozzle is to inject more fuel in the same amount of time, or the same amount of fuel in less time. So running a more and more capacity on a small nozzle means that in order to get that capacity out, it's going to take a lot more time to do it because we are pressure limited. We really can't make a lot more than 3,000 PSI effectively. So I recommend going with an 80% nozzle if you're going to run a 200cc injector, and then keeping pulse back at a reasonable level, 4 milliseconds or sub. It's going to be the most efficient setup. If you run a 30% nozzle, yes, you can probably inject that much fuel. You probably can make about the same power with them. And drivability will be good, but you're going to be running significantly more pulse, which makes more back pressure, which sprays outside the bowls on the pistons when you're high RPM. Just not ideal. So I recommend running a little bit bigger nozzle. There's arguments that can be made multiple ways, but like I said, I'm trying to keep this fairly short. I just want to explain the reason for them. So one of the things you'll notice is on like our stage 2 kit, we offer the KC's stage 2 charger. They're 6373. If you look at KC Turbo's recommendations, they say the 20530 would be the biggest ejector they recommend. Again, kind of coming back to this whole thing, I would rather run, this is our preference, a larger nozzle. They still want to inject, 200 cc's. They just want to do it a longer pulse. I'd rather run a larger nozzle and run less pulse. You're going to find a lot of opinions about it. 20580 running less pulse, or 20530 running more pulse. Both of them are going to make around the same amount of power. So the other thing is, if you're going to stick with a reasonable pulse and you are going to run a 30% nozzle, a lot of people say like, oh, why not get a 20530 instead of a 16030? And then your high pressure oil pump should be able to keep up. You won't need to upgrade it. Like we said earlier, a hybrid is going to be more efficient with high pressure oil. The reason I disagree with that somewhat, again, this is just my opinion on it, is if you are going to spend, let's take a look at this. So a stage 1.5 injector from Full Force, is $1,400. Okay, let's pull that up here. If you're going to spend $1,400 on those injectors, on an OBS, you're probably going to need a high pressure oil pump. So the logic is, well, why not go with a 20530? So let's take a look at 20530s here. Let's pull those up. Well, the stage 1.5 injectors are $1,400. The 20530s are going to be $1,900. So it's $500 more to get a set of the 20530s. In my opinion, if you're going to spend another $500 to get those hybrids just to save high pressure oil, why not spend $500 or $550 and get a new pump and get 16030s at a reasonable pulse? They're going to make about the same power within 15-20 horsepower, which isn't huge. And now you have a new pump and new injectors. You'll make 400 horsepower, and you have 2 new parts for the same money. That's my argument against them. I don't have anything against 20530s. I think they're fantastic. It's just a matter of what you're getting for the money you're spending. That's my logic behind it. Obviously, you can make that fit whatever you would like. That's up to you. So back to the packages. Essentially, this is what it comes down to. Do you want to stay with the drop-in turbo, or do you want to go with the T4 kit? 20580s with an S360 4.5. It's probably one of my favorite setups. It's, in general, fairly easy to tune. It'll make really good power. That charger spools up pretty fast. It's a very responsive turbo, especially like if you are after the maybe if you're at higher altitude, consider running like a 68 millimeter turbine instead of a 73 millimeter turbine. Playing around with the turbine housing sizes. Like I said, the cool thing is there's so many options for them, and they aren't incredibly expensive to where if for some reason you're disappointed, there are other options that aren't thousands of dollars. So anyway, I do like the T4 kits, but if you already have the intercooler, you've already got, up pipes, pedestal, all that, the drop-in does make sense. So that's kind of the basics there. And like I said, I'm going to cut this short. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off now here in just a second. I'm not going to cover transmissions because we kind of covered that in the last video. So go back, watch that one. We covered like how to pick a transmission. That's all in the last video. This one, I just want to talk about injectors and turbo sizing a little bit. One more thing. If you guys want me to cover something, whether it be with graphs, whether it be with just talking about them, like our opinions, our experience, what we've seen, I'm happy to do so. I just need to know what it is you guys want to see. So I'm going to keep making these. The next video is going to be 500 to 550 horsepower range. and that's going to cover Super Duty and OBS, because at that point, you're pretty much doing the same thing either way. So that'll be coming up here pretty soon. I'm probably going to do another video covering injectors and kind of how they work and how we choose them and what we see from them. And like I said earlier too, if you haven't already and you want more detail, check out our podcast, the 1023 Soul Shop Talk. Pretty much every podcast platform, we do go into more detail on that too. That being said, I appreciate you guys, and we'll be back here for the next one.